I'll share my screen, a window, meet. Natapos nyo na yung problem set nyo? Your assignment? Are you done with your assignment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Okay. So can you see it? Measures of dispersion and shape. Anyway, what is the formula for kwan pala? What is the formula for the mode? Linampasan ko yun last time, no? So the formula for the mode is, I'll show you. Saan ba ako pwedeng sige, kunwari dito na lang muna. Yung formula ng mode is the lower class boundary. Or let me see if I have here chapters 4 to 6. Na-download ko ba yun? Sa drive ko na lang. See first. Or I'll just give you, I don't have here. Present natin. Ito, chapters 1 to 3. You all, admit all. So I'll present this one. Yung chapter 1 to 3 muna ng book namin. Tabel. Chapter 1 to 3, share. Okay, so this is chapter 1 to 3 of our book, no, in statistics. So I'm the main author of this book. Yan, so punta tayo dun sa bandang last ng konti. Yan. So look at the mode. That is the formula for the median. Ayan, this is the formula for the mode. Siguro lakihan natin. Yung percent. Yung percent. 50. Let's see. 200. Tingnan ko kung kaya pa ng 200. Okay, can you see the formula for the mode? Yes or no? Kita nyo?
Nakikita po.
Okay, good. So if you're going to look at the formula for the mode, so you have here lower class boundary of the modal class plus frequency of the mode minus F1 over 2 times FMO minus F1 minus F2 times C. So if you already know how to compute for the median, so your C in the median, it's the same, that's the class size. In here, the lower class boundary is not in the median class but in the modal class. Now, how are you going to determine the modal class? The modal class is the class with the highest frequency. So if you're going to look at this, where is, for example, this one? So which of these class intervals has the highest frequency? Dito, no? Sa 13, tama?
Yes,
Yes?
ma'am.
Okay, so this is your modal class. So what is the lower class boundary of that modal class? Ito, mag-minus ka ng 0.5 dito. So you have 14.5. And what is the frequency of the modal class? It's yung FMO, that is 13. What is the what is F1? F1 is you go up one step, kaya 8. What is F2? You go down one step, kaya 7. Okay, ulitin ko. This is the formula, lower class boundary of the modal class plus FMO minus F1 over 2 FMO minus F1 minus F2 times 7. So what if we have this illustrative class now? The first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, or the sixth class interval? The What is your modal class? The class with the highest frequency? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth?
Fourth, ma'am.
Fourth, fourth,
Okay, good.
fourth.
So it's the fourth class interval. So what are you going to do? So you just have to highlight that this is already your modal class. Now, in your formula, you have this. Oh, so that's your modal class. So what are you going to do? What is the lower class boundary of the modal class? So since this is your modal class, you just have to subtract zero point 0.5 from your lower class limit. So you have 23.5. And then plus, what is FMO? FMO is 10. What is F1? It's one step above your FMO. And what is F2? One step below. So your F1 is 7, your F2 is 3. Do you follow? Nasundan niya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So that's it. You just have to substitute your values. And then what is the class size? How come it's 3? You just have to look at 15, 16, 17. So your class size is 3. So anywhere you can count here. You can also count in the fourth class interval 24, 25, 26, and it's the same. Okay? So you just have to substitute your values 23.5 plus 10 minus 7 over 10 times 2 times 10 minus 7 minus 3 times 3. Of course, you have to do first the things inside your parentheses and then you multiply it with 3. Then you add 23.5 and you get 24.4. Is that clear? Is that clear? Do you have questions? Maria Fe?
Ma'am, paano na po ulit nakuha yung lower class boundary?
Mag-minus ka ng 0.5 sa lower limit. Ito, naning. Oh. Halimbawa, yan. So, you have to determine the modal class. Once you have your modal class, this is your lower limit in your modal class. And to get the lower class boundary, you have to subtract zero point 0.5 from the lower limit. Okay na? Zero point 0.5 lang.
Yes po.
Okay. Other questions? Angelo,
Ma'am, how to get the distribution frequency po?
the frequency here, of course, you have to tally. Yung parang yung step 1, step 2, step 3 dati. Ilan yung 15 to 17, ilan yung 18 to 20, ganon. Minsan, I don't have to give you the raw data. I'll just be giving you the tabular data na. Parang ready na siya. Tapos ilalagay nyo na lang. O compute nyo na lang. Pero kung ang binigay sa inyo is group data, you have to make a frequency distribution data table out of that data. Then, of course, you already know how to do it. But sometimes, the objective is not for you to write the FDT or the frequency distribution table. You just have to compute for the given data. Oh, Angelo.
Ma'am, yung relative frequency pala po.
Relative frequency, kwan lang yon. Frequency lang, parang percentage. Yung 2 divided by the total frequency times 100. Kunwari dito, ano yung total na N mo? Total mo yung frequency mo, sas 2 divided by the total frequency. Percentage lang. 2 divided by the total frequency times 100. That is your relative frequency. Ako ha?
Yes,
Angelo?
yes
Okay.
ma'am.
Other questions? Okay na tayo? So, yun lang yung hindi ko na-discuss sa chapters 1 to 3 or doon sa mismong measures of central tendency and location. So, let's move on to the measures of dispersion and shape. Dito. So, tanggalin ko yung presentation ko. I'm going to present another table, another tab. Okay. So, this is chapter 4 of our book, no? Measures of dispersion and shape. So how are we going to compute for the measures of dispersion and shape? So what are these measures of dispersion? These are numerical values wherein you have to see how dispersed, gaano kawatak-watak yung data mo. So, if the measure of dispersion is zero, it means walang variation. Pare-pareho. Pero pag yung value mo ay farther from zero, 1, 2, 3, or more than, it means that your data is dispersed or watak-watak. Maliwanag yon? Varied, watak-watak, ganon. Pag it's concentrated to the mean, mas compress siya, mas maliit yung dispersion niya. Ngayon, pag pare-pareho sila, exactly the same, the dispersion is zero. You follow? Okay lang? Magsagot kayo pag nasundan nyo. Okay? Yes? Si- So what are the measures of dispersion? The first one is the range. Of course, you already know this. It's the highest value minus the lowest value. If you have ungrouped data, you just look for the highest value. For example, in this illustrative example, your highest value is 90, your lowest value is 70. So 90 minus 70, your range is 20. For group data, it's quite more complicated because you're going to get the upper class boundary of the highest class minus the lower class boundary of the lowest class. So look at this. What is the Take note that if these are your class intervals, how are you going to get the class boundaries? You have to subtract zero point 0.5 in your lower limit and you have to add zero point 0.5 for your upper limit. Okay? So you have your lower class boundaries and upper class boundaries. So what is the range? You just have to get the upper upper class boundary of the highest class. Ito, 162.5. And minus the lower class boundary of the lowest class. So 162.5 minus 117.5. Do you follow? Sundan nyo? Yes
Yes,
or
ma'am.
no?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay, madali lang yon. Thank you. Let's move on to MAD. What is MAD? MAD is mean absolute deviation. How are you going to compute that? So if you have your ungrouped data, so you just get the mean first, and then you get the absolute value, get the difference, and get the absolute value of the difference of your mean with respect to each of the x sub i's. Kunwari, this one. So these are your ungrouped data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you have 10 ungrouped data. So first is you have to compute for the mean. So ano ba yung mean? Alam niyo naman na yung mean, i-add mo lang lahat. So 840 divided by, lakihan natin. So first you have to compute for the mean. So 840, how did you get 840? Add mo lang lahat, no? So 840 yung total and then divided by 10. So it's 84. Then after solving for the mean, what if there is a decimal number here or decimal point? You have to round it off into whole number. So once you have it in the whole number, you can now solve for the MAD. How are you going to do that? You subtract your 84 from each of the given data. Kunwari, 77. 77 minus 84. This one is negative 7. But since it's in absolute value, so it will be 7. 99 minus 84, 15. 75 minus 84, it's 9. That's the absolute value already. Do you follow? Yes?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay, good. So once you have that, you just have to add all of these differences in absolute value. So it's 88. So your 88 here will be substituted to your numerator. So 88 over 10. 10 is your n. So 88 over 10 is 8.8. Therefore, your math is 8.8. Nasundan?
Yes po.
Yes, okay, good. So madali lang. Ngayon, if you have a group data, it's quite different. This is the formula. Pakihan ko para kita niya. So So this is the formula for the math. May klase ako balong hanggang klase ako hanggang alas 2. Diretsong klase ko hanggang 1:30. Oo, alas 2 na lang. Okay. Yan. So, this is your formula for your math. So, summation of Fi, Mi minus X bar over N. So, what is your Fi? These are your class frequencies. Then, what is your Mi? These are your class marks. K is the number of class intervals that you have. N is the summation of Fi. So let's look at the illustrative example. So try to find the value of the mean absolute deviation of the distribution presented in table 4.1 of the weights of 50 college students of a certain university in Pangasinan. So for example, this one, solve for the mean first. Kasi yung the same na data, so may mean ka na. What is the next thing that you have to do? So of course, you know how to get the Fi, you know how to get the Mi. These are the weights. So we just deal with the same group data before. So what is how to compute for the mean? Because you have to compute for the mean first. So the mean is equal to ito, sa pagda-download na wala yung one value. X bar to. Mi minus X bar. Insert formula equation X bar. And then, where is the equation? Basta mean ito. Sundan natin dito. Mm, maliliit ano. Natin. Mean. Yan. Yan. That is the formula for the mean. So, kopyahin ko lang din to na wala siya sa data. Control V. Okay. So, what are you going to do? Do you know how to do this? So, the mean is, if you're going to look at the mean is 139.1. So, in this book, we did not round this into whole number, but in our exam na, so for you to have easier solution, so we will just round this off into a whole number, yung mean. So you have to round it off before you have to subtract. Saan mo isusubtract? Isusubtract mo siya sa class mark or yung MI. So subtract mo, kunwari dito hindi siya naka-round off, no? Pero we used 139.1 here. So 122 minus 139.1, then absolute value, you get 17.1. 133, ito, MI. That's why you have MI minus X bar. X bar is the mean, which is 139.1. And then you get the absolute value, which is 8.1. So you just have to continue the process and you get your MI minus X bar. Now, what about in here? You have Fi times Mi minus X bar. So, what is this? So, for this value, Mi minus X bar, you have to multiply that with your Fi. So, Fi times that. So, magkakaroon Fi times that, makukuha mo to. So, Fi times Mi minus X bar. So, this is 17.1. So, 5 times 17.5. You have 85.5. 18 times 8.1. So, we have illustrated in this book also how to compute it. So, medyo illustrative talaga kasi kitang-kita mo kung paano ginawa. Okay? Do you have questions? May tanong kayo dito sa last column.
Ma'am, clarification lang. Sa exam
Yes.
po, whole number na po ang gagamitin namin.
Para hindi tayo, Kwan. Anyway, dun sa exam, if ever, i-note ko na lang. O kaya sa problem set. Kasi iniisip ko, kung kaya niyong gawin lahat ito sa exam na medyo kahul sa oras, baka ang exam niyo ulit ay multiple choice na lang, yung problem set ang maggaganito kayo. Pero sa problem set, you round off your mean first into a whole number before you subtract it. Okay? Naso-follow mo, Maria?
Yes po.
Okay. Yan. So you have Fi times the absolute value of Mi minus X bar. And you get the summation, which is 462.6. So once you have that, you just have to substitute that 462.6 over 50. That is already your MAD. So if I tell you that you just write your answers into two decimal places, then 9.25 yung sagot nyo. Ito kasing book namin, dinadagdagan namin minsan para three decimal places. Some it's just one decimal. So if you want in our exam, we just have to agree that it's two decimal places. Okay? Nasundan nyo? Yes? Let's move on. What is quartile deviation? Your quartile deviation, you have two types of quartile deviation. The first one is interquartile range, and the second one is semi-interquartile range. So for your interquartile range, you have Q3 minus Q1. Q3 is, you know how to compute for Q3 already, and you know how to compute for Q1. So interquartile range is Q3 minus Q1. And then semi-interquartile range, SIQR, is Q3 minus Q1 over 2. So we will not discuss this further because you already know how to compute for Q3, you already know how to compute for Q1. You just have to use this formula. If it's just interquartile range, it's Q3 minus Q1. But if it's semi-interquartile range, it's Q3 minus Q1 over 2. Okay? So you just have to follow the formula in computing for the uh, Q3 or P75 and Q1 or P25. So this one is the formula for the group data as we have computed in our percentile, decile, quartile before. So all you have to do is to compute that third quartile. So compute for the first quartile, ganyan. So to get the interquartile range, you just get Q3 minus Q1. Then for interquartile range, Q3 minus Q1 over 2. Next, we move on to the variance and standard deviation. What is a variance? Variance refers to the average of the squared distances from the mean, while the standard deviation is the positive square root of the variance. So the variance, you don't have a square root, but in your standard deviation, you have to compute for the square root of that variance. Nung nilagay ko yung ginawa kong docs ito, na iba-iba yung ibang formula. So, the symbols, sigma, sigma yan dapat, oh. Sigma and sigma square. Copy. Ilagay ko dito, hindi kita yung isang sigma ko. Yan. So, you have sigma square and sigma. If you have a population, standard deviation, it's sigma. Population variance, it's sigma square. And then for your, if you want to use your sample standard deviation, it's S. And then sample variance is S squared. Yan. Ito, copy natin. Trophy. Okay. So how to compute for the standard deviation and variance? So for ungrouped data, these are the steps. You have to solve first for the mean. Then what's the next one? You have to, for each data, obtain the deviations from the mean, square each deviation, and find the sum of the square deviations. What else? Finally, solve for the average of those square differences to get the variance, and for their standard deviation, extract the positive square root of the variance. So these are the symbols. Copyhin ko ulit to. Draw copy. Okay. Yeah, so this is the symbol for the population variance, and this is the symbol for sample variance. So what is here? You have the population mean. This one, mu is the population mean, n is the population size. Your x bar here is your sample mean, and your small n is your sample size. So let's look at the illustrative example. For example, determine the variance and the standard deviation, and these are your data. The first thing that you have to do is compute for the mean. So once you have the mean, yan na, it's 27.63. So in this book, in our book, we have used two decimal places. But in your exam, again, in our problem set, before you use this, the mean, you have to round it off into a whole number. So 35 minus, in this case, 27.63 yung mean. So 35 minus 27.63, 7.37. Take note that in your math, you also get the difference here, but you get the absolute value. However, in your variance, instead of getting the absolute value, you just have to square. So, kunwari, 7.37, you have to square. So, 54.32. You get the difference and then you have to square. 2.66. Get the difference and square. So, you have to do that in each of your given values. So, what will happen? What will happen here? So, you will have a sum. So, i-add mo lahat, no? So, the sum is 141.9. Once you have that, you just have to substitute that in your numerator. And then for the denominator, it's n minus 1. So you have 141.9 over n minus 1, which is 7. Therefore, your variance is 20.27. Do you have any question? May clarification? May tanong? Okay lang kayo? Walang tanong? Nasundan nyo? So, for example, you have your ungrouped data. All you have to do is to get the mean first, and then you subtract it with your individual data. Subtract mo. If you get the absolute value for each of the differences and you add it, then you'll have the mod, di ba? Gawin mo yun sa numerator and then over n. But if you want to compute for the variance, instead of just getting the absolute value, you write another column wherein you have to square. So to get the difference, the each xi minus the mean, get the difference, and then you square the difference. You have to total it. Once you have to total, get the sum, and that is the value that you have to substitute in your numerator for your variance. Nasundan nyo na? Nasundan? So, punta lang kayo doon sa data natin. Ganyan lang. Tignan nyo lang kung paano ginawa. So, subtract mo doon sa individual xi and you have to square the difference. And then once you have the squares of the differences, you just have to total it or get the sum. Then you substitute it in your numerator over n minus 1. And then for the standard deviation, you just have to get the square root of the variance. So whatever your variance is, if you get the square root, that's already your standard deviation. So parang you are computing for one, but the results will give you two values. Okay? What about for group data? So for group data, you have your sigma again. So if I will not be stating that you have to compute for the population, standard deviation, ganon. It is automatic by default that you will compute for the sample standard deviation. Yan. So this is for your population. Control V. That is the formula. And for the sample, this is the formula. So we have an illustrative example. So this is for group data na ha? Group data. So how to compute for the group data? So let's go back to our illustrative example before in table 4.1. So this is it. So if you have your weights, your number of students. So these are the distribution or frequency distribution of the weights of your students. No? So you have 50 students. And then you have your MI, FI, MI minus X bar ulit to. Kunin ko nga. Hindi nakokopya lahat kasi iba yung processor nito. Naka Google Chrome yung aking processor. So, hindi niya gusto yung ibang formula. So, anyway. Saan na ba? So, get the X bar. To. Hiramin ko yung formula ng X bar. Wala. So, hindi na ako Ay, alak to yung number mo, sir. Kunin ko yung number mo pag. May number ka, sir. Number. Cellphone number. Ay. Wow, buti pa si Sir Oliver may calling card. Sige, may distraction. Saglit lang. Okay. Pasensya na. Let's look at that. Yan. So, we have here the formula. So, X minus X bar kasi siya, no? Nandito na siya. So, for group data, so you have here MI minus X bar. Hindi naman niya kinuha yung X bar. Natin na. Ayan. Copy. MI minus X bar. Control V. Ang laki naman ng X bar na yun. Anyway, pareho lang naman. Sige. Dali lang tayo ha. Sige, yun na nga lang. Gawin ko na lang ito muna. Copy. So, I'll put it here, MI minus X bar. Paste. X bar is the mean. Okay? So, parang kanina, take note that in computing for your math, you have MI minus X bar, then get the absolute value. But in here, instead of just getting the absolute value, you have to get the square. Diba? You have to get the square. So, MI minus X bar square. So, nasan yung MI natin? 122. What is your mean? So, it's very important that you have to compute for your mean first. So, in this case, your mean is 139.1. So, 122 minus 139.1 and you get the square. It's 292.41. So, you have to do that in all your rows. And then, aside from that, you have another column here. You have to multiply your Fi times Mi minus X bar quantity squared. So, 292.41 times your Fi, which is 5. So, 5 times 292.41, you get 1,462. Next, 18 times 65.61. So, you get this. 12 times 0.81, you get this. 7 times 98.0. Nasundan nyo ba? Yes or no? Sundan nyo? Were you able to follow? Ha? Ayaw nyo naman nang sumagot. Kindly answer. Were you able to follow it? Yes, yes. Yes. Okay, sige. So, once you have your Fi times Mi minus X bar squared, you'll get your sum. So this sum will be substituted in your formula here inside. If this is s squared, the variance, you don't have the square root. But if you want the standard deviation, you have to write the square root. So, kunwari yan, if you want to solve for the, kasi dito ang tinatanong is compute for the uh, standard deviation. So, pag ang tinatanong ay standard deviation, kunin mo yung square root niya. Pero pag ang tinatanong is yung variance, you don't have to get the square root. But if you want, you can also compute for the standard deviation first, wherein you have your square root. But take note that your variance or s squared is the number that is inside your square root, you know. So your variance is 126.46. Kasi yan yung nasa loob, yung wala pang square root. So your variance is 126.46 and your standard deviation is 11.25. Do you follow? Yes? Bising pa kayo? Now, let's move on to the measures of coefficient of variation or CV. The formula is S over mean times 100. Your S here is your standard deviation and your X bar here is your mean times 100. So what is the use of the measures of coefficient of variation? So for example, you have two data and you're going to determine if which of the two data are more varied. Sino dito sa data na to ang mas magkaiba? So yung isa ba na data or isang group of data or yung isang group of data? So ano ang sagot? So you have to compute for the CV for each of the two data. Data ang plural, walang datas ha. Wala sana akong marinig sa inyo na datas. Walang ganun. It should be datum pag singular, data pag marami. Pag plural. So for example, this one is the distribution of the average monthly wages of the two departments of a certain company. Department, average wages, standard deviation. This is manufacturing, quality control, and delivery. So for this one, you have two departments in a certain company. And then these are the average wages, yung sweldo nila. At ito yung standard deviation. Ano daw ang mas iba-iba ang sweldo? Sa manufacturing, the average wage is 14,450 and the standard deviation is 700. And in your quality control and delivery, the average wage is 13,350 and the standard deviation is 900. So which of these departments have more varied wage? Saan ang mas iba-iba ang pasweldo? Okay, so you have CV equals S over X bar times 100. You have to get or compute for the coefficient of variation for manufacturing department, and you have to compute for the coefficient of variation for the quality control and delivery department. So yan, substitute mo lang yung values mo. You don't have to compute for the S and X bar already because it's already given in your table. You know, average monthly wages, that's already your X bar. Standard deviation, that's already your S. O yan na, substitute mo lang. So for the manufacturing department, the CV is 4.84. For quality control and delivery department, it's 6.70. So which one is more varied? Yung mas malaki ang CV, yun yung mas varied ang pasweldo. So 4.84 versus 6.70, the answer is 6.70. Ano ang mas maraming variability? Therefore, the quality control and delivery department, the wages of that department is more varied kasi mas malaki yung 6.70 compared to the wages of the people in the manufacturing department. Ano yung term na consistent? Therefore, the manufacturing is more consistent, so there is greater variable delivery. Siguro maganda na yun na ilagay dito. The more the manufacturing department, ano ang ba ang mas malaki? 4.64. Manufacturing department ang mas maliit. Is more consistent. Ibig sabihin, mas maliit yung variability niya, so mas consistent siya. So kung mas consistent yung manufacturing, ano naman itong isa? More varied naman yung isa. More consistent yung 4.84 but more varied naman yung quality control and delivery. Sundan nyo? Ay, Jan Lloyd, saan ka galing? Kasi join mo, paalis na kami. Yan. So, we have measures of dispersion for normal data. We'll no longer include that, yung VR. Hanggang CV lang tayo. And then, measures of distribution shape. May 9 o'clock na kayo, klase kayo, at Google din kayo doon. Google Meeting. Or hindi kayo
Meron po, ma'am.
nagme-meeting. Ha?
Meron po.
Meron din. Kay Sir Shator.
Siyempre po.
Sabor.
Oo. Nagkukon din siya. Online meeting din siya.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ah, ay, sige. John Lloyd. Masama pakiramdam mo? Anong nararamdaman mo? Busted? Joke. Sige, pagaling ka, John Lloyd. So daw yung pakiramdam niya. So, measures of dispersion and shape. Ito, skewness and meron tayong types of skewness. Sagarin ko lang yung oras. Siguro mag-extend ako ng 5 minutes. Tapusin natin to. Okay lang?
Yes, ma'am.
Sige. I-type nyo na lang kay sir. Medyo nag-extend si Ma'am She kasi tinapos niya yung topic namin kanina. So, for the skewness, ito na yung measures of shape. You have two types of shape, no? Dictating the shape. You have skewness and kurtosis. For the skewness, this is the degree of asymmetry of a distribution or departure from symmetry. So, you have three types of skewness: positive, negative, and you also have your positive, negative, and the perfectly skewed. Ito talaga binabago niya yung formula tsaka ibang data. So you have skewed to the right, you also have skewed to the left, and you have perfectly skewed. So yung perfectly skewed, hindi siya skewed, yung parang bulkang mayon siya. That's a perfectly skewed. This is negatively skewed or positively skewed. Sa ibang books, they say negative skew, positive skew. So nakalin siya. Paano mo nasabing negative skew to or negatively skewed graph? This is the tail of the graph and this is the head of the graph. This is the tail, this is the tail of the graph, and this is the head of the graph. So, for example, visualize this graph as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then this is the frequency. Nagpa-exam ka ng 1 to 10 na sa mga estudyante mo. Then you have, these are the frequency. So if you have a negatively skewed graph, it means that there are more students. Kung this is the mean, yung gitna. There are more students who got high scores, di ba? Than students with low scores. Kasi kukunti lang, yung frequency ito, kukunti lang ang nakakuha sa mababa. Tapos habang lumalaki yung score, dumadami sila. And then medyo marami na talaga yung nasa high scores. Do you follow? Pag negatively skewed. But if you have a positively skewed graph, tignan nyo kung saan marami. Dito sa low scores mo, dun, dami. Tapos habang lumalaki yung score mo, bumababa na, kumukonti na. So ano ibig sabihin nito? If you have a positively skewed graph, mas maraming dihamak ang mababa ang score. If you have a negatively skewed graph, mas maraming estudyante ang mataas ang score. Do you follow? Yes or no? Nasundan niyo? Nasundan?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, so once we know the interpretation, we can now compute or estimate the skewness. So it's very easy to compute, to show the graph. But what if we don't know the graph and we just know the data? So this is the formula. Sk equals 3 times the x bar minus m sub 0 over s. We can also use another formula, 3 times x bar minus median over s. So I think in the exam, we just have to use one formula. Pwede bang yung SK natin na median ang gamitin natin? Okay lang sa inyo. Ito na lang tayo. SK equals 3 times the mean minus median over S. Ito na lang, ha? Okay lang? Okay lang kayo? So, ito yung gagamitin natin. Yung SK equals 3 times mean minus median over S. So, of course, you know how to compute for the mean, you know how to compute for the median, and you know how to compute for the S or standard deviation. You just have to substitute your values and then you can compute for your SK. Yan. So, may illustrative example dyan. Kunwari, may mean ka na, may median ka, may standard deviation. O, ilagay mo lang, compute mo lang. So, if your SK is positive, it means it's skewed to the right. If your SK is negative, it's skewed to the left. If your SK is 0, it means it's a perfectly skewed graph or it's like a bell-shaped curve. O ha? Now, what if you have a mean for the group data? Ito, mas komplikado na sa group data. So, if this is your group data, siyempre, ang pag-compute mo ng group data, computein mo na yung median using group data, your standard deviation using group data, and your mean using group data. So, once you have that, you can just substitute your values in your SK formula. So, based on your SK formula, 3 times the mean minus median over S pa rin. So, you just have to compute your data using group data formula. So, in here, based on this, your SK is 0. So, it means it's a perfectly skewed graph. So, it's a normal distribution graph. Ibig sabihin, bell shape siya. Normal curve. And finally, we have kurtosis. So for kurtosis, ito na yung peakedness or gaano katangos. So parang ilong natin to. Sino ang may ilong na platycardic? To, flat. Mesocardic, katamtaman. At yung sobrang tangos, no, leptocardic. So sa mga Pilipino, nandito tayo sa meso, platy. Pero may mga pinagpalang sobrang taas leptocardic. Pero pag nasa UK ka, if you are in England, halos lahat ng ilong nila nandito sa leptocardic. Ano? Okay, so anong ibig sabihin pag platycardic? We have to understand the graph. So if you have a platycardic, this is more dispersed or more heterogeneous. Iba-iba yung data. Mesocardic, yan yung parang normal distribution. Okay lang siya. Hindi siya masyadong dispersed. Hindi din siya masyadong coerced. Dito naman sa leptocardic, hindi siya dispersed, kundi nakakompress siya. So it's more on homogeneous data. Yan, so leptocardic. So, paano tayo mag-compute? This is the formula for ungroup data. X minus X bar. Take note that in your standard deviation, you just have to square this. Pero sa kurtosis, erase mo na siya sa 4. Tapos N, which is the sample size, S raised to 4. Ibig sabihin, yung standard deviation mo, erase mo sa 4. But if you have a variance, which is S squared, i-square mo pa ulit to get S raised to 4. Okay? And then for the group data, ito na siya. Imbis na mi minus x bar raised to 2 for the standard deviation, gagawin mo, erase mo siya sa 4. Take note that in this formula, yung fi, hindi siya i-erase sa 4 ha, kasi ang common mistake ng mga estudyante ko, they raise this mi minus x bar raised to 4, and they also raise fi raised to 4. It's not. The one that you have to raise to 4 is just the mi minus x bar. And the fi is not raised to 4. Okay? Over ns raised to 4. In here again, your n is not raised to 4. Your standard deviation is just the one to be raised to 4. This is the illustrative example. Kunwari, meron kang group data. So, this is mi minus x bar, fi minus fi times mi minus x bar square. So, this one, 2.15, you square first before you multiply sa 2. Pero sa fi minus mi minus x bar raised to 4, yung mi minus x bar mo, which is 2.15, you raise that first into 4 before multiplying to fi. Sundan nyo? So, ang common mistake ng mga estudyante is, in-square nila to, 2.15, tapos tinimes nila sa FI, nakuha nila yung 9.25. Tinamad na sila, ang ginawa nila, 9.25 in-square. Iba siya. Kunwari, 9.25 times 9.25, kahit compute nyo, magiging mas malaki na sa 81. Pero it's not. 42.74 lang. So, anong gagawin nyo? Yung 2.15, yung mi minus x bar, yan yung erase nyo sa 4 before you multiply it to fi. O, yan. So, you just have to get the sum. Yan. To get the standard deviation, syempre kailangan mo yung standard deviation kasi ilalagay mo dito sa baba. So, once you have that, you can compute for k. K is 2.4. Ngayon, meron tayong kurtosis. Ano yung value ng k para magkaroon ka nito? If your value for k is less than 3, it's platykartic. If it's equal to 3, it's mesokartic. And if it's greater than 3, it's leptokartic. Okay? May tanong kayo? Wala na? Wala na?
Ma'am, isi-send niyo po yung PPT.
Isi-send ko ba?
Ma'am, sige na.
Ma'am, send nyo na.
Baka kasi ilik nyo. Part ng libro ko to eh.
Ma'am, wala
Hindi
ko
na.
yung video.
Sige, pwede rin. Pero kwan, ang ibibigay ko siguro, wag niyong kalat ha. Wag
Yes
niyong
po.
ikalat. Maglalagay ako ng kwan na lang. Ipi-PDF file ko yung kailangan nyo. Para yun ang isend ko. Kasi marami to eh. Hanggang anong chapter to. My book is chapters 1 to 12, 11. So yung kailangan yung data, i-compress ko sa isang file tas isend ko. Ganun na lang. Basta meron pa itong counting and probability. Meron pa tong sobrang dami nito. Actually hanggang na to, meron pang non-parametric statistics to. Anyway, sige, pwede rin. Basta ikon ko mo. Your call ends in 7 minutes. Saglit, mag-picture na tayo. Dali. Stop presenting. Open your cam, please. Ano na to? Shift Control F3. Drag to capture. Dalian nyo. Open yung cam nyo. Dali. Open cam. Dalian nyo. 1. Magpipicture na ako. Bakit ang tagal mag-open cam nung iba? Dalian nyo mag-open cam. 1, 2. Ay, absinan ko yung hindi naka-open cam. Malay nyo, hindi kayo yung nandyan sa likod. Yun nyo lang tapos natutulog pala kayo.
Ma'am, di ako maka-open.
Bakit? Close ka?
Ma'am, yung yung camera ko hindi maka-open.
Sige na nga, Rod. O yung iba.
Ma'am, nasa powder room po ako.
Nasa? O sige na nga. 1, 2, 3, smile. Yan. Okay? Sige. So, paalam. May bibigay akong
Bye.
problem set sa inyo. Gawin nyo ha. Para na naman dito sa topic natin. O, ganun talagang buhay. Okay? Sige, bye-bye.
Oh, bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Ay, ma'am.
Okay, sige, bye-bye.
Pasangit.